What is up, everybody, and welcome back to TarHeelIllustrated.com. I'm Jacob Turner. Joining me, as he always does, our very own publisher, Andrew Jones. And AJ, we are here to talk about the news that broke earlier on Monday afternoon about Ian Jackson officially entering the transfer portal after just one season at North Carolina. A guy that, just to summarize his freshman year a little bit, I think was really integral to what Carolina did, particularly on the offensive side of the ball during a major stretch of the season. And then, as illustrated here in the piece that you put out on him transferring in his 5 postseason games, Jackson averaged just 3.4 points in only 14 minutes. So a guy whose production in minutes kind of dwindled down the stretch, kind of in a weird way. It kind of coincided with Carolina playing some of its better basketball in the season. So we'll talk about that here in a second. But we were talking off camera. I don't think, and I think you've made this joke before or alluded to this, we probably shouldn't be surprised about anybody staying or leaving in today's world when it comes to this crazy transfer portal era that we live in currently. But I think the consensus amongst some Carolina fans, maybe more than I think, and I know amongst us, was this is something we kind of expected and saw coming. And if you've been on our message boards over the last few days, maybe you were privy to some of that info too. So what is just your initial reactions to Ian Jackson officially leaving North Carolina?
We had all but said for the last 2 weeks he was not coming back. The reason you can't definitively plant a flag in the soil on something like that is because it's very difficult to do that with the portal.
Yeah, it's fluid, man.
And with NIL money flowing around and stuff like that, there's nothing is 100% concrete until it becomes concrete. But I was on the board earlier today, people asking questions, what's the timetable for current players on the roster? And I responded about Seth and Van Allen and Drake. And I said, as far as Ian goes, I said, he is not, we do not expect that he'll be back. I said, an announcement could come out in a minute from now or in 2 weeks from now. And it was like 40 minutes later, the word came out that he officially entered the portal. So we waited to do the Ian podcast, entering the portal podcast, until it happened because we want it to be as current as possible. Sometimes we do these a little bit in advance to get them taken care of. But I wanted to wait to see this thing play itself out. And it's wild that I was in 3 or 4 different threads or these questions that I was asked today specifically about Ian or the returning or the current players on the roster. So this is not a surprise. He was very clear in October that he was one and done. He thought to the NBA, but now it'll likely be to another college. We can speculate there, but I don't think there's any value in doing that. What's important is that he's no longer going to be at North Carolina. That was not a surprise. I don't think he was super happy late. I've been pretty honest about that. In fact, I've been pretty open about conversations I had with him later in the season about the shots he was getting. And this was a period, he had that 7-game stretch where he averaged 22.7 points. He was fantastic. He was driving. He was taking over stretches of games. The Tar Heels weren't very good during that period, but Ian was outstanding. And then the Tar Heels continued to struggle and struggled even more when they went super small. And Ian often found himself playing the 4. He was stuck over in the corner, and he was getting completely different shots. He wasn't able to drive. A lot of stuff wasn't there for him. He wasn't getting as many touches. He wasn't getting as many shots. So after the Syracuse game, and we had the video, you could watch it on our YouTube channel. You can just Google it. I talked to Ian right outside the locker room and asked him about the differences in shots he gets as a 4 as opposed to playing a 3 or a 2. And to his credit, he did everything in his power to be very diplomatic, to say the shots are different and I don't like them. And what was interesting about that is he knew I knew. There were mistakes that we articulated that Hubert made during the year, okay? One of them was that everybody knows it was a small ball. And with the small ball, what happened is you pushed the end of the corner and you lost him. You lost his value, minimized it tremendously. So the next game was NC State at home, and afterward Ian was available in that game after that game to the media. And I went up to him real quickly. I said, "Hey man," I wasn't trying to get you to say something bad about Hubert. I just wanted to talk about the difference in shot opportunities. He said, "No problem, man. We good." Gave me a fist bump. He knew I knew that was not where he needed to be. in that situation. This isn't rocket science. I'm not Jay Billis here. I'm not Bill Raftery. Anybody could have figured it out, but I'm in position to talk to them about it. Most people aren't because they're just fans. I'm in position with my job to ask those questions, and I did. And it was pretty clear he wasn't thrilled with the kind of shots he was getting. And then he didn't really, when they changed big, he didn't really have a defined role. Like he didn't play a ton early, but played. He kind of ebbed and flowed. He had that spurt against Florida and then came out and for some reason didn't go back in. And you thought, wow, I mean, there was the next game, UCLA, when he exploded. Maybe had he stayed in the game against Florida, maybe they beat Florida. Who knows? The bottom line is, as it turned out, in the end, he just didn't fit. He didn't fit. Hubert didn't think he fit, or he would have played him more, would have used his skills more. And I'm sure Ian had enough. When I talked to him in Milwaukee about, some people got on me about some of the questions I was asking. I had to ask him because I'm like, look, it's the last game of the year. We don't know if we're going to talk to these kids again. You got to ask them these questions. And one of the things I took from it is that Ian learned a lot. I really believe Ian learned a lot this year. I think he matured during the course of the year. He grew up as a player and as a dude because he had to go through that bad stretch. He went through it and he came out. And I think he came out with perspective. It forced him to do some self-examination. And he probably sees his path a little different now than he did 5 or 6 months ago, which is okay, because maybe that would have been the wrong path long-term for him. We don't know. But when I talked to him in Milwaukee, I told you when we did podcasts later that evening that I got the clear vibe that he was done. He was gone.
Yeah.
I mean, we did a podcast that night. We did our 3 things after the Ole Miss game. Then we did another podcast about, who's coming back type of thing. And one of the photos you used of that was Ian. And I told you before we recorded, I said, just don't see it. But I can't go out and speak for him without him saying that. But I use that kind of information to fuel what I say on the board or some of the things we steer here in some of these pods. We've kind of stayed away from talking about current players much on these pods because everything is so fluid. And we don't want to record something and then we can't use it or it's worthless 20 minutes later. But we've been clear on the boards that we did not expect him to return. I thought maybe he would enter in the draft to get info and college, but I think he knows that with him really not being on any draft boards right now, that he needs to go somewhere else and play in college. A new fresh start for him. And Hubert will have to find someone that can fill the role that he thought maybe Ian would have next year. That's a very long response. Apologize for being so long-winded, but I had to get a lot of that out.
No, there's a lot of info in there, a lot of background info on it as well to kind of provide some context is important here. But it's a weird, you can understand maybe why some of those frustrations were there, again, for the reasons that you just alluded to. But also, he had an interesting freshman season, man, because there was a point in this year where he was like Carolina's best scorer, and it wasn't even really close. Like he was integral to what Carolina was doing on the offensive side of the ball, at least. And we spent a lot of podcasts talking about it. I think maybe you and David talked about it too, of, he's scoring for Carolina, but he's not really contributing in much in other areas. And I know his defense did improve a little bit and little things like that you can point to. But when he was at his best, he was kind of an offensive juggernaut, and that was kind of what you were getting out of him. And that was kind of it. But it also coincided with Carolina playing, some of his worst basketball of the season, maybe when he was playing his best. And what I found interesting was, as the season went on and Carolina kind of turned it around, you saw them go a little bigger. Jalen Withers kind of stepping up at that 4 spot. The mind always goes back to that Syracuse game at Syracuse, and Withers kind of exploded. When Carolina started to play its best basketball of the season late, Jackson he wasn't what he had once been. He wasn't being relied upon as much. I'm sure he had games and he flared up at times and still did some impressive things, but he wasn't as integral to Carolina's success as he was at one point in the season. And for a guy like him coming in as a true freshman and the expectations around him and NBA, one and done kind of hopes that he had and alluded to before, for that to happen, I mean, that can be a lot to deal with, especially for a young man like him. So his freshman arc kind of had those ebbs and flows that you'd expected, but to me, there's really no surprise because of his minutes dwindling and because of Carolina's success kind of playing its better basketball when he wasn't as a part of it. I can understand why frustration can kind of creep in there and make you say, you know what, maybe I need to go kind of look elsewhere in today's world. Now, if this was 10 years ago, is Ian Jackson who's someone who transfers out? I can't answer that question. But in today's world, I can't really sit here and look at his season and how it went down and be necessarily surprised that he's deciding to, go somewhere else and play basketball.
There are 3 7-game stretches, the last 21 games of the regular season, to look at to really get a gauge of the ebb and flow of things. The 7-game stretch that he scored a lot, they actually played pretty well. It started with UCLA. They won that game. That was their only quad 1 win. And he went for 20-something, 25.
Yeah, he was big time.
Okay, then they have Campbell. He went big against Campbell. Louisville, they lost. They win at Notre Dame. They win at NC State. They come home and beat SMU. Let's see, so 7-game stretch. So UCLA, Campbell, I'm doing on top of my head. Louisville, Notre Dame, NC State, SMU. And then Cal, somewhere in that stretch. It was the Stanford game when Hubert went small, and then Ian's numbers just started to plummet.
Yeah.
So his numbers dropping coincided with Carolina going really, really small. So they were okay before Hubert went super small. Then they were terrible. And they were terrible right up through Clemson, although he did start Withers against Clemson, but he only played 17 minutes. So they went small a lot that night. And Ian recovered a little bit. He had a couple of games, including the one at Syracuse, which is one of the reasons we talked to him after that game. But it was kind of up and down. And then in the postseason, he was basically MIA.
Yeah,
I thought he played hard. Mm-hmm. I thought, I was courtside right there for San Diego State game, and I thought he defended his rear end off. I thought he played hard defensively in the ACC tournament. I don't think effort was an issue. Some people have said that. I don't agree with that at all. I truly believe that, Ian wanted to win games and was doing everything in his power to do that, but he was also confused. He knows he's a scorer. He's a bucket getter, and he wasn't getting buckets. So if you are a bucket getter and you're not getting buckets, you want to go somewhere you can get buckets because that's who you are. And he wasn't great throughout the course of the year defensively. He wasn't a guy that's going to feed the ball to others, didn't do some things well, but there's no replacement for a bucket getter. Ultimately, the job is to get more buckets than the other guy. So if you got a guy that can help you do that, then he's tremendously valuable, even if he doesn't dip his hands into some other baskets that some guys do. So people are going to look back on this and say, well, it was a lost opportunity for him and for Carolina. And maybe Hubert did mess up a little bit on this one, or maybe Ian just didn't play well and didn't like the floor and didn't handle it well. And being a young guy, maybe that was part of his maturity, where sometimes to mature, you have to be immature. And you have to work through that. And part of his growth as a person, as a player, and as a dude. So if you're a Carolina fan, you hate to see talent like this come in and leave, but you're talking about 2 big-time recruits that have come in and left. They played a total of 3 years. So that's not going to go over well. But people need to understand, if you look at the world just isolated in North Carolina, you're going to be spazzing out and wondering what the hell's going on. But if you take a look at outside the rest of the country, you're going to realize this is fairly normal. Unfortunately, it's normal. It's Carolina still kind of likes to think of itself as guys don't leave Carolina, but that's part of Carolina's problem, man. Guys do leave. Mm-hmm. And they're going to continue to leave as long as things don't change with the rules and the transfer policies and everything else. So it's happening everywhere.
Yeah, it's happened everywhere. And again, it's happened in places like Carolina, like you just alluded to. Let's real quickly talk about, and let me clarify one thing just to go back. You mentioned, you brought a great point up talking about that stretch with, Notre Dame, State, Cal, all that stuff. Jackson played well and Carolina was winning during that stretch. And just to clarify what I was trying to say there is, I think everybody kind of knows here, and I know you know this, AJ, Carolina's basketball came at the end of the season. The best basketball they played came in the season. He wasn't as a part of that team. Carolina was winning games during that stretch, but they weren't the team at that point that they ultimately ended up kind of becoming.
I did a piece tracking at the end of the year, tracking the 7 games in which he averaged 22.7. Then there was a 7-game drop-off where he averaged like 11 and a half or 11 or something like that because he had one 18-point game there. I think it was against BC. But overall, the thing that was doing it for me were the free throws. He was averaging 6 free throw attempts during that first 7-game stretch. Then the next 7-game stretch, he's averaging like 2.3. And then the final 7 games, he kind of was up and down. He played a decent amount. I thought his floor game was a little bit better. That's when he got some of his assists, but didn't have high volume scoring or shooting games. And David and I were talking on a podcast very late in the year about how when he was in games, it was kind of mind-numbing how they did not run plays for him. He wasn't driving as much. He was more of a jump shooter late in the year than he was earlier when he was having a lot of success. And they weren't running stuff for him. A lot of his shots were rushed. They were contested. He just looked totally out of sorts. And they don't run a ton of plays other than for RJ, for anybody really. They started running that little curl out to Ian later in the year. And he wasn't great coming off the screens, but he wasn't getting great screens. It just looked like an oil and water type thing late in the year, that it wasn't working out late. It wasn't going to work out. And probably for both parties, it was best that he went his separate way. And I think that there's an element of that with Elliot Cadeau as well. And before people jump on here and say, oh, you're bashing Hubert, or that's a reason to bash Hubert, kids enter college with a different mindset, a different sense of entitlement now than they used to. It's changed dramatically very quickly. So coaches have to get used to that. And they're also going to have to get used to the idea that a kid may come in, and if he's entitled in one area and it didn't work out, he may go ahead and leave. Some kids may stick it out. Some guys may go ahead and leave, especially ones that think they're on the fast track. And I could assure you, because he said it, I was right there next to him when he said it in October, Ian was on the fast track. Fast track derailed when Hubert went small, and he never got back on it. So now he must go find a new track.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Real quickly, just before we head out, I want to talk about what Carolina's losing there for a second and maybe what it means for them moving forward, especially in the portal. Already lost RJ, obviously, who graduated. Elliot Cadeau, I know he plays point guard, and Ian's a 2 essentially, and so was RJ this past year. But Cadeau gone as well, so just kind of another guard you're losing. I know they brought in Jonathan Powell and kind of slotting at that too. What his role is going to be or intended to be when he was recruited and ultimately committed to North Carolina, I don't know yet. We just haven't had an opportunity to talk to Hubert and kind of see what the deal is with that. But it obviously leaves another kind of hole there at the 2 spot. I mean, Carolina's going to have to go get guards in the portal. And you did a drop this morning talking about they need a point guard in the portal. Now you've lost another 2 guard. I mean, what do you think it means for North Carolina moving forward this offseason? Well,
nothing matters if they don't get a point guard.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I did a podcast last week, a daily drop about, pump the brakes, don't panic. No reason to panic. However, they got to get a point guard. They're halfway through the portal right now. Kids can sign and commit after the portal closes April 22nd. But if you go look at the best point guards that have been in the portal, most of them are gone. And one of the highest rated ones left Chapel Hill. So will there be a drop-off at point guard? Possibly. So if that's the case, then you got to surround him with some special guys. Well, you're losing the second all-time leading scorer in school history as your shooting guard. Mm-hmm. So Jonathan Powell's a nice piece, but he's not RJ Davis. They got Vasar in, the big kid from Arizona. That's nice. They need more. They need to stack up and get some guys. And it's okay to get 5 or 6 new dudes and win, because there's a lot of teams that went far in the NCAA tournament that did just that. So they need to get a point guard. They need to get someone that could fill it up on the perimeter, another guy. And quite frankly, they probably need to get 2. So they got their work cut out for them. They have the resources to do it. I think they have the appetite to do it, but they've slow played a couple situations, and they're still a little picky, which I think is okay, because just because you slap a bunch of talent on the books doesn't mean you're going to win 30 games. There's no doubt about that. You got to get the right guys in there, and Hubert is a little bit of a different bird. So he's got to get guys in there that can handle him and could work with him going the course of the year. And I don't mean that critically at all. I don't mean that to be critical of him at all. He's just different than a lot of other coaches. And he's going to push some different things than other coaches. So you got to get dudes that match. And there's plenty of really good players out there that would love to be in a program run by Hubert Davis. Oh, yeah. They just got to work things out. That's all. They'll get somebody, but if they want to attract those shooters, mm-hmm. they got to know who's going to be feeding them the ball. So I think it's time to really roll up the sleeves and get a point guard. Let everybody know who the quarterback is, and then go out and get all your receivers and running backs, if you know what I mean.
I definitely know what you mean. Crazy how much scoring Carolina's lost in the portal, especially with Ian Jackson now leaving. I mean, that is a lot of your offensive production just going out the door, especially late on the season when, again, like I know Jackson not as much, but when Carolina's playing its best basketball, Withers is gone, RJ's gone, Cadeau's gone. It's three. Arguably, you take Lubin out of there, who again we expect to stay. I mean, that's three of Carolina's best players down the stretch. I mean, they just were, especially in the tournament. So
whatever Drake, I think Drake made 30-something threes maybe. Mm-hmm. And Seth made about 16, 18. So you got maybe 53 made three-pointers back.
They got to go get scores, man. They do. Absolutely have to. I mean, they're really lacking in that
guard department. Can fill it up, man.
But, hey, man, it's a process. We'll throw the P word out there. It takes time.
It's a process, but right now it's a process on roller skates, not in athletic shoes.
Yeah,
they got to tighten up the roller skates and get some stuff going with a point guard. Everything will take care of itself if they do that. I'll reiterate, it was not time for panic last week, and it's not time for panic now. But they've got to zero in on getting a point guard, so everything else can be built around that guy. Because if you will get a total distributor, then you need to get someone who could really fill it up at the two. If you get a scoring point guard, maybe you can look over there and say, you know what, we don't have to have a guy who's going to rain them from three all the time. The two and the three have to mesh with the one. Mm-hmm. So you got to get your one. And, maybe I don't want to say anything I shouldn't say right now about people's decisions, but get yourself your point guard and everything else will fall into place.
Yeah, well said. I think we can end it on that. It's a good spot to end this podcast.
My phone is abso-freaking-lutely blowing up right now.
I believe it.
It's like July 4th in this little thing right here.
I can believe
it. You can't hear it.
That's what happens, man.
Or the table is shaking with all the vibration going on.
That's what happens when people enter the portal, man. That phone starts blowing up. Alerts and text and all that jazz. Yeah. We got work to do. You got work to do. I got work to do. Let's get on out of here. I've been Jacob Turner. He's been Andrew Jones. Another edition of the THI podcast. Appreciate you guys watching. Let us know in the comments. We want to hear from you guys. What do you think about Ian Jackson entering the portal? What are your thoughts on it? Now, we want to hear from you guys. And what do you think Carolina needs to do next in the portal? Any players you like that Carolina's been linked to or anything like that you think could fit well for the Tar Heels next season? Get involved in the comments below. Make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell too. And real quickly, head on over to Twitter, head on over to Facebook, links in the description below, and like our pages. When we hit our next milestones, we'll be giving away some more premium subscriptions to TarHeelIllustrated.com, absolutely free. Great value. And all you got to do is follow us and like our social channels. Appreciate it, guys. And we'll see y'all next time. Thanks.